Hey everyone, it's Jimmy here with that usual reminder to hit like and subscribe and give the notification bell a ding. Also, don't forget to drop a quick comment saying that you're doing your part or letting everyone know where you're tuning in from. On a scorching day in Scottsdale, Arizona, June 29th, 1978, police were called to a quiet apartment complex where something was terribly wrong. Inside Unit 132A, they discovered a chilling scene. A shirtless man lay sprawled lifeless on the bed, his head brutally battered, and an electrical cord knotted around his throat. Blood was splattered on the walls and even the ceiling, and the injuries were so gruesome that he was barely recognizable. It turned out to be Bob Crane, the 49-year-old actor beloved as Colonel Hogan from the sitcom Hogan's Heroes. This violent end to a familiar TV star shocked the public and Hollywood alike. Crane's slaying launched an investigation fraught with scandal and speculation, and launched a mystery that remains officially unsolved decades later. Bob Crane's rise to fame had been swift and spectacular. A charming radio personality turned actor, he became a household name as the wisecracking hero of Hogan's Heroes, which ran from 1965 to 1971. The show was an overnight hit that made Crane one of TV's most recognizable faces. After the series ended, however, his career faltered. He took roles in a couple of Disney films and even toured the country in dinner theater productions to make ends meet. By 1978, Crane was in Scottsdale performing in a stage play called Beginner's Luck at the Windmill Dinner Theater, far from the heights of his earlier Hollywood stardom. Behind the clean-cut image of a TV hero, Bob Crane led a secretive personal life that many believe may have caught up with him. He had a well-known obsession with photography and gooning, using his celebrity status to meet numerous women and documenting his escapades along the way. Long before the era of internet videos, Crane amassed Polaroid photos and home videos of his encounters, essentially creating his own private collection. A key figure in this part of Crane's life was his close friend John Henry Carpenter. He was a video equipment salesman whom Crane met through mutual friend and fellow actor Richard Dawson. Carpenter, who worked for Sony, supplied Crane with early video technology and often joined him on nights out cruising for women. Crane would introduce Carpenter as his manager to help facilitate their trysts, and the pair even filmed some of their joint encounters using the latest video gear. Crane's family and friends have maintained that the women involved were willing participants, but the situation was murky. In fact, several women later told police they had no idea they were being recorded until investigators informed them after Crane's death. This unsavory aspect of Crane's private life remained mostly hidden during his heyday, but it gradually became an open secret. His dressing room on set was a den filled with stacks of illicit photos and films. Crane's habit of showing off photographs of himself with women eventually alarmed colleagues and studio executives. In one incident, while filming the family-friendly Disney movie Superdad, Crane passed around explicit photos to crew members on set. This was a reckless move that soon made its way into tabloids and damaged his wholesome reputation. By the late 1970s, his addiction to hot action and filming had not only hurt his career, but also strained his second marriage and potentially set the stage for his killing. In the last week of June 1978, Bob Crane was living in a modest Scottsdale apartment during his theater run. John Carpenter had flown in to visit him on June 25th, planning to spend a few days with Crane while he performed. The two friends were seen dining together and visiting a local nightclub on the night of June 28th, the eve of the slaying. According to some accounts, that evening wasn't entirely friendly. Witnesses later claimed that Crane and Carpenter had an argument at a club, apparently over Crane's trying to distance himself from Carpenter. Crane's son would later testify that his father had wanted to cut off the friendship, finding Carpenter's presence obnoxious and no longer wanting him around. Whether or not a confrontation occurred that night, what is known is that Carpenter returned to his hotel, and Bob Crane went back to his apartment in the early hours of June 29th. The next day, Crane failed to show up for a lunch meeting with his co-star, actress Victoria Berry. Concerned, Berry went to his apartment that afternoon and stumbled upon the horrific sight of Crane's body in bed. The scene suggested he had been eliminated while asleep in the early morning hours. He had 2 deep gashes on the side of his head, consistent with being bludgeoned by a heavy object, and a VCR electrical cord was found tied tightly around his neck. Blood soaked the bedding and spattered the room, indicating a violent struggle or attack while he lay in bed. Yet, there were odd clues. There was no sign of forced entry into the apartment, and nothing of value was missing. This indicated that Crane likely knew his killer and had let them in willingly. Scottsdale, at the time a growing upscale community, was not accustomed to such crimes. In a somewhat bizarre twist, it was such a safe place that the local police department didn't even have a dedicated homicide division in 1978. Unsurprisingly, investigators were ill-prepared for a case this complex and high-profile, and the initial handling of the crime scene showed it. As detectives combed through Crane's apartment, they quickly learned about his extensive video collection and extramarital exploits, which pointed them toward John Carpenter. Carpenter, being one of Crane's closest companions and the last known person to see him alive, instantly became the prime suspect. Police noted that there was no break-in, suggesting Bob had opened the door for someone he trusted. When they examined Carpenter's rental car, a critical piece of evidence surfaced. Small blood smears were found inside the vehicle. Testing revealed the blood was type B, the same blood type as Bob Crane, and neither Carpenter nor anyone else known to have driven that car had type B blood. This discovery strongly hinted at Carpenter's involvement, at least according to allegations made by the investigations. However, 1978 forensics had limits. DNA testing did not exist yet, and blood type evidence was only circumstantial. Moreover, detectives never located the weapon used in the crime. They suspected a camera tripod, fitting given Crane's video hobby, as the blunt instrument. Notably, one of Crane's tripods was believed to be missing from the apartment, but they couldn't prove it. The county attorney's office felt the evidence was too weak to charge anyone at that time. Further complicating matters, the investigation had been compromised early on and in a fairly major way. In the chaos after the body was found, Crane's friends were allowed to walk through the apartment and inadvertently tamper with evidence before all forensic work was done. This lack of a pristine crime scene and the generally lax handling of evidence made it harder to build a solid case. Despite the cloud of suspicion around John Carpenter, authorities in 1978 declined to make an arrest, and the case went cold. Years passed with Bob Crane's slaying unsolved, but it was never forgotten. In 1990, a new detective took a fresh look at the evidence, and by 1992, Scottsdale police finally felt they had enough to move on John Carpenter. Investigators had unearthed an old crime scene photo that had been overlooked. It appeared to show a speck of brain tissue in Carpenter's car near the dried blood smears. The actual tissue sample itself had long since been lost, but a judge ruled that the photograph of it was admissible evidence. Bolstered by this and the original blood type matching, prosecutors charged Carpenter with Bob Crane's slaying in 1992, nearly 14 years after the crime. The case went to trial in 1994, and it captivated the public as sordid details of Crane's private life spilled out in court. The prosecution's argument centered on Carpenter's motive and the physical evidence linking him to the scene. They contended that Crane was trying to end his toxic friendship with Carpenter, even alleging that Crane had called Carpenter on the night of June 28th to officially cut ties. According to the prosecution, it was this rejection that enraged Carpenter enough to bash his former friend to death. Crane's son Scotty testified that his father had referred to Carpenter as a hanger-on, whom he needed to push out of his life. Combined with the blood evidence and the missing tripod, the state painted Carpenter as the only person with both the opportunity and personal motive to bludgeon the actor in a fit of anger. Carpenter's defense, however, aggressively attacked the weak points of the case. They pointed out that much of the evidence was circumstantial or tainted by time. Witnesses from the restaurant on June 28th testified that Crane and Carpenter seemed to be on good terms that evening, undermining the theory of a dramatic confrontation. The defense attorney highlighted that no weapon was ever found, and that the camera tripod as weapon idea was purely speculative. In essence, it was an assumption based on Carpenter's occupation and the nature of Crane's hobby, but never proven. Moreover, the defense argued that the police investigation had been sloppy from the start. They emphasized how key evidence had been mishandled or lost, raising doubt about the reliability of the forensic findings. To underscore this, they humiliated the prosecution by pointing out that they had to rely upon a photograph of what appeared to be brain tissue. The defense, without accepting that it was brain tissue as a fact, but accepting it for the point of argument, questioned this. If the police could miss literal brain tissue in the prime suspect's vehicle, it raised some serious questions about what else they missed. Carpenter's team also brought up alternative suspects to widen the scope of reasonable doubt. They noted that Crane's lifestyle involved many women and secrecy, suggesting the possibility that an enraged husband or boyfriend of one of Crane's partners did it. They also suggested that a family member of a woman who was unaware that Crane had recorded her may not have taken kindly to that fact and caved in Crane's head. Simply put, they emphasized that if he was actually doing things like that, it was only a matter of time, and he basically got what he deserved. In addition, they referenced a troubling incident. A few months before the attack, Crane had gotten into a heated argument with another actor in Texas. That man had allegedly threatened Crane's life to such a degree that those familiar with him reported that Crane was legitimately worried for his life. Any of these scenarios, the defense argued, meant that Carpenter was far from the only person who might have had a motive to kill Bob Crane. After weeks of testimony that laid bare the late actor's private vices, the jury remained unconvinced of Carpenter's guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. Carpenter walked free, maintaining his innocence, and died in 1998 of natural causes, taking with him any answers he may have had about that night. For Crane's family, it was a bitter outcome. They had sat through the scandalous revelations of trial, only to see the lone suspect go free. Officially, the case returned to unsolved cold case status, with no one held accountable for the crime. Bob Crane's slaying remains one of Hollywood's most perplexing cold cases, and over the years it has attracted a web of theories. In the court of public opinion, many still agree with the original investigators that John Carpenter was the likely killer who evaded justice. After all, a jury can't find someone innocent. They can only find them not guilty, and not guilty means that the state failed to prove the elements of an offense beyond a reasonable doubt. With the mystery still unsolved, speculation runs rampant. One controversial theory came from Crane's eldest son, Robert, who has at times alleged that his stepmother, Crane's second wife, may have been involved. At the time of Bob's death, he and Patricia were on the verge of finalizing a divorce, and Bob's will left her everything. Robert Crane pointed out that Patricia stood to gain financially if Bob died before the divorce was final, insinuating a possible motive. However, police never found any evidence implicating her, and investigators have publicly stated they do not consider her a suspect. Other theories frame the entire thing as a massive Hollywood conspiracy though there's really so many variants on it that it would require its own dedicated video on the topic. On a cold Saturday night in February 2005, Danielle Imbo and Richard Petrone left a bustling Philadelphia bar and seemingly vanished into thin air. The two friends had spent the evening hanging out with another couple at a South Street bar called Abilene's. Around 11:45 p.m., they said their goodbyes and walked towards Richard's black 2001 Dodge Dakota pickup truck, but they were never seen again. The next day, Danielle missed a hair salon appointment, and neither she nor Rich answered their phones, alarming their families. By the time police were notified, there was no trace of the couple or the truck. Danielle, 34, was a mortgage processor from Mount Laurel, New Jersey, and the devoted mother of a young son. She was separated from her husband at the time and had an outgoing, warm personality. Richard, 35, was a lifelong South Philadelphian who worked at his family's bakery. A blue-collar family man, Rich was essentially a single father and did everything for his daughter, according to those who knew him. Danielle and Rich had known each other through Rich's sister and had been dating on and off in the months before they vanished. February 19, 2005 had been an ordinary day that turned into a baffling mystery. Earlier that evening, Danielle had dinner plans with her mother, Rich's mother, and some girlfriends. During the outing, she arranged to meet Rich later for a night out. Rich and Danielle met around 9 p.m. at one bar and then joined another couple at a second bar nearby. Friends described the mood as cheerful and normal, just a casual night out with live music and conversation. Shortly before midnight, the four friends parted ways outside the bar. Danielle and Rich were seen walking hand in hand toward Rich's parked truck, which was conveniently close by. They planned to head back across the river to Danielle's home in New Jersey, a drive that should only have taken 30 minutes. But somewhere between the crowded nightlife of South Street and Danielle's house, they vanished without a trace. No witnesses have ever reported seeing anything unusual. No crash, no struggle, nothing. Traffic cameras and bridge toll records showed no sign of the Dodge Dakota crossing into New Jersey that night. And in the days and weeks that followed, there was zero activity on Danielle's or Richard's cell phones, credit cards, or bank accounts. The Mount Laurel Police and Philadelphia Police quickly enlisted the FBI, treating the case as a possible abduction or foul play scenario. Despite the late hour, busy city streets like South Street usually have people around, yet no one reported a scream, accident, or disturbance. From the outset, investigators were confronted with a frustrating lack of physical evidence, and Richard's truck has never been found. The FBI's Philadelphia field office took the lead in the investigation, joining forces with the Philadelphia Police, New Jersey State Police, and multiple other agencies. Over the years, this joint task force has conducted hundreds of interviews and chased down leads across the country. Detectives even followed reported sightings as far away as Alaska and the Pacific Northwest, but none of these leads panned out. Investigators methodically checked area bridges, highways, parking lots, chop shops, and waterways for any sign of the missing Dodge truck. In fact, civilian dive teams searched major local rivers multiple times in hopes of locating the vehicle underwater. Now, if this level of intensity for a case where no crime was even proven to have occurred seems odd to you, you won't have to wait long to figure out why this was the case. By 2008, with the case turning colder than a polar bear's ass, the FBI publicly revealed what many had feared. They believed Danielle and Rich were likely victims of a hitman plot. Agents pointed out that there had been no ransom demand, no extortion attempt, and no evidence to suggest a random kidnapping gone wrong. A spokesperson came forward to say that there was likely methodical planning behind the disappearance. What this agent didn't say, though, is who may have been behind it. And the authorities were clear. that there were no red flags in their life that would make them a target for a hit. Over 2 decades, a number of theories and rumors have swirled around the Imbo Patron case. One line of speculation was that Richard might have crossed someone dangerous. Some have suggested it's possible he owed money to the wrong people or had ties to organized crime. The FBI dug into his history and found no evidence that Richard was in debt to loan sharks or connected to the mob, or anything else that would make him a target. By all accounts, he was a hardworking baker and devoted dad who wasn't in debt to anyone. That said, this was in the days before serious digital forensic investigation, so I do have some doubts. The most persistent suspicions have centered on personal motives. In particular, Danielle's estranged husband, Joseph Imbo, has been a subject of intense scrutiny. Danielle's split from Joe had been tumultuous. He had cheated on her, and the divorce was bitter and fresh. In the weeks before the disappearance, there was a confrontation where Joe angrily warned Richard to stay away from his wife, even calling Richard at work to threaten him. This history of bad blood made it easy to speculate that a jealous or angry Joe could have orchestrated harm to Danielle and her new boyfriend. In fact, Richard's mother was so suspicious that she tried to confront Joe Imbo at an early press conference, barely a week after the couple went missing. Joe, however, had what police say is a solid alibi. He was attending a family birthday party 50 miles away that night. Several witnesses, including an off-duty police officer, vouched for his presence, and there are allegedly photographs of him at the party. Investigators questioned Joe many times and even had him take a polygraph, but they have never named him as an official suspect. To this day, no arrests have been made, and no person of interest has been publicly identified. Today, the disappearance of Danielle Imbo and Richard Patron remains one of Philadelphia's most notorious unsolved mysteries. After all these years, the authorities are still actively seeking tips and are offering a reward of $50,000 for information leading to answers or an arrest in this case. Hey everyone, Jimmy here once again with a quick reminder to hit that notification bell and turn on all notifications. Also, don't forget to check out my new channel, Lazy Chill Tales, for some seriously creepy stories to chill out or fall asleep to. Deep within the story of human evolution lies the puzzling question of why we're so different from our primate cousins. A bold and controversial theory offers a surprising answer. Perhaps our ancestors once called the coastal waters and rivers their home. The aquatic ape hypothesis presents a fascinating alternative to traditional evolutionary thinking. Picture this. Instead of adapting solely to life on land, our early ancestors may have spent crucial periods living in or near aquatic environments. This watery chapter in our past, the theory suggests, could explain some of humanity's most distinctive features. From our upright walk to our nearly hairless bodies and our remarkable ability to hold our breath, this theory seeks to explain it all. The story begins with Alistair Hardy, who first dared to imagine our ancestors as semi-aquatic beings. Hardy envisioned early humans wading through shallow waters, swimming across rivers, and diving beneath the surface to gather food. In his mind, this aquatic lifestyle provided the evolutionary pressure that shaped us into the unique creatures we are today. Walking upright became advantageous for navigating through water while keeping heads above the surface. The gradual loss of body hair made sense for animals spending significant time submerged. Hardy drew inspiration from nature itself. He looked at seals, otters, and other aquatic mammals in particular. He noted they share traits remarkably similar to humans that seem oddly out of place among typical land dwellers. For years, Hardy's unusual idea remained in the shadows of scientific discourse. Then came the 1970s, when Elaine Morgan breathed new life into the hypothesis. Morgan championed the theory with passionate conviction, arguing that it offered superior explanations compared to the prevailing savanna theory. This is the generally accepted idea that our ancestors evolved their distinctive traits while adapting to life on the open grasslands of East Africa. According to aquatic ape hypothesis proponents, there's a plethora of evidence to support their position. Among all land mammals, humans stand virtually alone in our near-complete hairlessness. This is a trait far more common in dolphins, whales, and other aquatic mammals. Beneath our skin lies a substantial layer of fat, serving the same insulating and buoyancy functions that keep marine mammals comfortable in their watery world. Our upright posture also takes on new meaning when viewed through an aquatic lens. Wading through water while foraging from trees hanging over rivers and shores would have made bipedalism not just useful, but essential for survival. Meanwhile, our sophisticated breath control, crucial for both speech and diving, mirrors capabilities found in marine mammals rather than our terrestrial relatives. Perhaps most intriguingly, humans possess something called the diving reflex. When submerged in water, our bodies automatically slow the heart rate and redirect blood flow. Interestingly, this is a response we share with seals and whales, but not with most land-dwelling mammals. The theory extends beyond physical adaptations to encompass diet and brain development. Proponents argue that early humans living near coastlines would have had access to seafood rich in omega-3 fatty acids. These nutrients, essential for brain growth, might explain the remarkable expansion of human intelligence compared to other primates. In this narrative, our proximity to water didn't just shape our bodies, it also transformed our minds into something more. Yet for all its compelling logic, the aquatic ape hypothesis faces fierce opposition from mainstream science. The most damning criticism centers on a glaring absence: fossil evidence. Archaeological discoveries consistently place early human ancestors in ancient forests and savannas, not along prehistoric shorelines or lake beds. Critics offer alternative explanations that keep our ancestors firmly on dry land. Bipedalism, they argue, evolved as an efficient way to traverse vast grasslands, allowing early humans to cover great distances while conserving energy. The loss of body hair becomes a cooling mechanism for surviving in hot, open environments rather than an aquatic adaptation. The scientific community raises another fundamental concern: the theory's lack of testable predictions. True scientific theories must generate hypotheses that researchers can confirm or refute through experimentation and discovery. Critics contend that the aquatic ape hypothesis primarily seeks to explain existing traits without offering concrete, verifiable predictions about what future evidence should reveal. This limitation has led many to dismiss the theory as speculative storytelling rather than rigorous science. While the aquatic explanation may seem elegantly logical, it remains trapped in the realm of what if, rather than advancing into testable scientific territory. The debate continues to ripple through evolutionary biology, with passionate advocates on both sides presenting their cases. Whether our ancestors ever truly embraced an aquatic lifestyle remains one of evolution's most captivating scientific mysteries. Timothy Pitson, a 6-year-old boy from Aurora, Illinois, vanished in May 2011 under highly unusual and tragic circumstances. Timothy was born on October 18, 2004, to James Pitson and Amy Fry Pitson. On the morning of May 11, 2011, Amy picked Timothy up from his elementary school in Aurora, Illinois. She told school officials there was a quote-unquote family emergency, but no such emergency existed. Amy then took Timothy on a bizarre journey visiting several verified locations over the next 3 days. Their first stop was the Brookfield Zoo in Brookfield, Illinois. Later, they visited Key Lime Cove Resort in Gurnee, Illinois, where they spent the night. The following day, they traveled to the Kalahari Resort in Wisconsin Dells, Wisconsin. Security footage from these locations shows Timothy appearing to be unharmed and in good spirits. On May 13th, Amy checked out of the resort alone. This was the last confirmed sighting of Timothy. After leaving the resort, Amy purchased stationery and mailed several letters to family members. That afternoon, she was seen at a grocery store in Rockford, Illinois, where she appeared calm. However, later that day, Amy was found expired in a motel room in Rockford from an apparent you-know-what. And yeah, sorry, I hate censorship too, but chances are you would have never seen my video if I included the actual word. Amy left behind a note stating that Timothy was safe and with people who would care for him. More cryptically, she also wrote that, quote, "He'll never be found." The investigation into Timothy's disappearance began immediately after Amy's body was discovered. Authorities found no trace of Timothy at the motel or in Amy's car, which was littered with small bloodstains confirmed to be Timothy's. However, the stains were not significant enough to suggest he had been seriously harmed, and it was later determined that this was likely the result of a nosebleed prior to the abduction. Investigators also discovered that Amy had taken steps to conceal her tracks. For instance, her phone records showed that she had driven to several remote areas before her death, apparently in an attempt to ping cell towers there. Despite extensive searches in the areas she traveled, no meaningful evidence of Timothy's whereabouts was found. Over the years, law enforcement has pursued numerous leads, but most have ended in disappointment. One of the most publicized developments in the case occurred in April 2019, when a young man in Newport, Kentucky, claimed to be Timothy Pitson. He told authorities he had escaped from captors who had held him for years. This claim initially raised hopes that Timothy had been found. However, DNA testing quickly revealed the individual was not Timothy, but a 23-year-old man named Brian Rinne with a history of criminal activities and deception. Notably, Rinne was sentenced to 2 years in prison for the hoax and the harm he inflicted on the Pitson family. Numerous theories have been proposed regarding Timothy's disappearance. The most optimistic theory is that Amy gave Timothy to someone she trusted, as she claimed in her note. This would mean Timothy might still be alive, living under a different identity. However, skeptics argue that it would be nearly impossible to keep such an arrangement secret for so long, especially with the widespread publicity surrounding the case. That said, others argue that there are numerous cases of parental abductions where children live their life under an assumed identity for decades. Some theorize that Amy may have given Timothy to individuals who were under the belief that Timothy would be endangered if he was returned to his father. Another theory is that Amy may have ended Timothy, though there's no significant evidence to indicate this is the case. Others suggest that Amy might have left Timothy in a remote location where he succumbed to the elements. This theory aligns with the lack of physical evidence and the extensive but fruitless searches in the areas Amy visited. Further, it provides an alternative theory as to why she visited such remote locations. Perhaps she wasn't trying to ping cell towers to throw off investigators. Rather, perhaps she was looking for a location to drop the boy off where he would never be found. Notably, his father, James Pitson, strongly believes his son's still alive. If he is, I have a feeling that one day Timothy will submit his DNA to a genetic testing agency and be in for the surprise of a lifetime. Tiffaine Véron is a French woman who vanished while vacationing in Japan in the summer of 2018. Born in 1982, Véron was 36 years old and worked as a school teaching assistant in France. A seasoned traveler and enthusiast of Japanese culture, she had meticulously planned a 3-week solo trip to Japan, a destination where she had been before. After arriving in Tokyo on July 27, 2018, Tiffane traveled to the historic city of Nikko, about 100 miles north of Tokyo, that's known for its temples and scenic forests and mountains. She checked into the Turtle Inn in Nikko and spent much of her first day sightseeing. Notably, a typhoon had hit the area on July 28th, which slowed her down as many of the local trails were still in bad shape. On the morning of July 29th, Tiffane was seen eating breakfast at the inn. She left on foot around mid-morning with a small shoulder bag, leaving all her other belongings, including her luggage, passport, and travel documents, in her room. Unfortunately, she never came back, and the inn's owner reported her missing the next day when she failed to return by July 30th. Tiffane's last known movements remain largely speculative due to the lack of clear evidence. Multiple witnesses saw her at breakfast on July 29th before she headed out to sightsee. One tourist's photograph from that morning even captured Tiffane during breakfast in the background, which is always helpful given the fragility of memory. A backpacker later claimed he saw a woman matching her description around midday, walking alone on a forest path in the area. This sighting, if accurate, placed Tiffane in the wooded trails of Nikko hours after leaving the hotel. This is a detail that raised eyebrows, because heavy rain from the prior day's typhoon had made trails slippery and less frequented by tourists. Tiffane's family also discovered from her online data that her phone connected to the internet for the last time around 10:30 that morning, after which all signals ceased. When Tiffane failed to show up or contact anyone by the following morning, it became clear something had gone wrong. Notably, Tiffane suffered from epilepsy and required medication to manage it. Local authorities responded promptly once Tiffane was reported missing. The immediate concern was perhaps in the excitement of travel she had forgotten to take a dose of her medication, which led to her falling on the typhoon-battered trail. Within days, dozens of police officers and volunteers were scouring the area, but initially found no trace of her movements. Search efforts focused on the rugged terrain around Nikko, which features dense forests, rivers, and hiking paths. The region's geography is both scenic and perilous, with steep mountain trails and fast-flowing streams where a person could slip and get severely injured, or fall into a typhoon-swollen river. Early search operations included teams on foot, police dogs, divers checking the river, and drones scanning from above. Helicopters were also deployed to survey the mountainous areas around Nikko, particularly near the Daya River and a scenic gorge called Kanmangafuchi Abyss, where tourists often walk. And despite the name, this abyss is actually extremely scenic. And if you're one of those people who just listen, I'd suggest looking at your screen now if you're at all into nature. Despite these extensive efforts, no definitive clues were found in the initial weeks. Tiffane's phone and personal items, aside from those left in her room, were never recovered, and there were no confirmed sightings on security cameras or by other hikers in the days following. As days turned into weeks, Tiffane's family took active roles in the search and investigation. The French embassy in Japan notified her relatives of her disappearance on August 1st, 2018. And to foreshadow a bit, her case has become something of an international incident. Shortly after they were informed, Tiffane's sister and brothers flew to Japan to aid in the search and meet up with local authorities. They initially praised the Japanese police's efforts, but rapidly grew anxious about the pace of the investigation, as well as the focus on an accident rather than foul play. One early complication was that Tiffane's hotel room had been cleaned and rebooked by the innkeeper very soon after she vanished. Unfortunately, this occurred before police could thoroughly examine it. This potentially disturbed a primary scene and made it harder to collect forensic evidence. Language barriers also posed challenges. The Veron family needed translators to communicate with Japanese police, which slowed the exchange of information. Further, Japanese police have consistently maintained there were no clear signs of criminal activity in Tifane's case, treating it as a missing person case, possibly due to an accident. Indeed, from early on, the Tochigi Prefectural Police leaned toward the hypothesis that Tifane might have fallen into the river behind her hotel and been swept away. This theory is based on the area's dangers. The inn is near a river, and a fall could be fatal. However, the family found it unconvincing given that thorough searches of the river for several miles turned up no body or belongings. Nonetheless, the family remained determined in the face of adversity. They appeared on Japanese television to plead for help, distributed flyers around Nikko with Tifane's photo, and spoke with anyone who might have been in the area at the time. By mid-August 2018, roughly 2 weeks into the search, police intensified their efforts around known tourist spots. Despite these thorough searches and even periodic helicopter sweeps of the mountains over the following months, no physical evidence was found. By the end of 2018, authorities indicated they would not conduct new large-scale ground searches unless credible new clues emerged, though they continued to keep an eye out during aerial surveys. Over the course of 2019, numerous investigations were undertaken by the family, as well as private Japanese citizens looking to help in the case. But again, no signs turned up. Tifane Veron's family has been relentless in pushing for a deeper investigation, both in Japan and through international channels. Within weeks of her disappearance, they reached out to high-level officials for support. Tifane's mother wrote to French President Emmanuel Macron in August 2018, pleading for more resources and attention on the case. Over the years, the Veron family has organized multiple trips back to Japan, met with police, and held numerous press conferences to keep the spotlight on the case. They've funded private investigators and experts, and even turned to European institutions for support. Their lobbying has caused French members of the European Parliament to press Japan on its obligations of legal cooperation with the EU in such cases. This international pressure has caused Japanese police to keep investigating the case. From the outset, theories about what happened to Tifane Veron have centered on two main possibilities: a fatal accident or foul play. As already discussed, the Japanese investigators have generally favored the accident hypothesis, having found no evidence in support of foul play. I'm not going to fully go through it again, but they generally focus on the fact that she may have been walking near a river on a slippery path and may have had a seizure or sudden fainting spell. All the evidence for this is circumstantial, and no trace of Tifane has ever been found in the area of the river. The other leading explanation is foul play, which Tifane's family firmly believes is the more likely scenario, and several factors fuel this theory. Tifane disappeared in broad daylight from a populated tourist town, which is in and of itself highly unusual. The fact that her phone abruptly went offline is seen as suspicious by some. The family interprets this as a sign that something sudden and violent happened, since a simple fall wouldn't necessarily destroy a phone or prevent it from at least pinging the network. Though that said, if she had fallen into the water, this provides a rational alternative explanation for why her phone may have suddenly went offline. Of course, there's always the potential that her phone charge simply ran out, and this entire phone battery issue is a red herring. More troubling is something that emerged from local reports about a sinister individual targeting female tourists traveling alone. This man, who operated in the Nikko area, pretended to be a friendly guide to these women, but in reality was known to harass them and assault them when they rejected his advances. This raised alarm that Tifane could have encountered someone with ill intentions. Police later tracked this man down and interrogated him. They've officially stated that this individual was not in the area at the time and was not considered a suspect, but the mere existence of such a person added to fears of foul play. Further, the family also has concerns that the Japanese police investigative files were either incomplete or that the investigation itself was of poor quality. Others have speculated that another criminal might have taken advantage of her trust, given the reputation of Japan as one of the safest countries in the world. Other less prevalent theories have occasionally been floated, though they have essentially no supporting evidence. One is that Tiffany might have chosen to disappear intentionally for personal reasons. Others have proposed the potential for a wild animal encounter gone wrong, but again, no supporting evidence exists. As of now, Tiffany's family continues to strongly advocate for justice for her and won't let her case be forgotten.